Welcome to the Holiday Podcast, where we sit over homemade challah at my table on Friday afternoons. I'm your host, Tammy Priest, a Jewish follower of Jesus, and it's great to be with you again today as we talk about this intersection between the old and the new. So I've talked before about how in Judaism we have a read through the Bible in a year program every year. And everyone, everywhere around the world is studying and preaching on the same exact passages every week. And it's one of those things that I've always loved about how my people are so woven together even when we're scattered around the world. So anyway, this week I was studying the passage in 1 Kings about Elijah and the prophets of Baal up on Mount Carmel with my women's Bible study. So let me read to you that passage, which is pretty long, but it's kind of action-packed, and then I promise you'll see how it links back to what I was just saying about the weekly Bible reading. So this is from 1 Kings chapter 18. The minute Ahab saw Elijah, he said, "Is this indeed you, the troubler of Israel?" And Elijah answered, "I am not the one who has made trouble for Israel. You have, and your father's house, by turning away from the commandments of the Eternal and following the Baals. Now gather for me all Israel at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who dine at Jezebel's table." Ahab called all Israel together and gathered the prophets at Mount Carmel. Elijah stepped forward and said to the people, "How long are you going to limp between two opinions? If the Eternal is God, follow the Eternal. If Baal is God, follow Baal." The people made no answer. Then Elijah said, "I am the only prophet of the Eternal left, and there are 450 prophets of Baal. Let us have a couple of bulls. They can choose one, chop it up, and lay the pieces on the wood, but do not put a fire underneath it. And I will prepare the other bull. Lay it on the wood without putting fire under it. You then call upon your God, and I will call upon the Eternal. The one who answers by fire is the real God." The people answered, "Well said." Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Since there are so many of you, you take a bull and prepare it first. Call on your God, but don't set fire to the wood." They took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on Baal from morning to noon, shouting, "Answer us, Baal." But there was no sound, no answer, as they did their limping dance around the altar that had been set up. At midday, Elijah began to mock them, saying, "Call louder. He is a god. Maybe he's thinking, or has gone off to the privy, or maybe he's asleep and will wake up." So they raised their voices, cutting themselves with knives and lances, as was their practice, until blood flowed. And they raved on from noon until mid-afternoon, the time when grain is offered in the temple. But there was no voice, no sound, no sign of attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come closer to me," and they gathered around him. Elijah then repaired the damaged altar of the Eternal. He took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Eternal had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." And with these stones he built an altar in the name of the Eternal. Around the altar he made a trench large enough to plant 2 measures of seed. He then arranged the wood, sliced up the bull, and laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, "Fill 4 jars of water and pour it over the burnt offering in the wood." Then he said, "Do it again," and they did it a second time. "Do it a third time," he said, and they did it a third time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the afternoon grain offering, the prophet Elijah came forward and said, "Eternal One, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, make it known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Eternal One, answer me, and let this people know that you, the Eternal, are God, and that you were the one who turned their hearts back. The lightning of the Eternal came down and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It licked up the water in the trench as well. When they saw this, all the people threw themselves to the ground and cried out, Adonai hu ha-Elohim, the Eternal alone is God. The Eternal alone is God. And then God sends the rain that had been stopped up for 3 years. There are so many things I want to talk about with this passage, with this event. A lot of the calling out and answering and not answering. I actually think I'm going to need to write a study with all the notes I wrote this week. But the thing that really stood out to me was how much this event reminded me of the golden calf incident at Mount Sinai. There are so many parallels. In the desert, Moses had been gone for 40 days, and the people grew desperate, right? They were in the desert without their earthly leader for more than a month and not hearing from him or from God. And I think they were kind of like, we believe in God, but we're scared and we're tired of waiting, so we'll just cover all of our bases for now, just until Moses gets back. And then a few hundred years later, leading up to Mount Carmel, the people hadn't heard from God for 3.5 years, and God had stopped the rain for that whole time. So these people were desperate. They were spiritually and physically parched and starving. And so they added some Baal worship to their God worship to cover their bases. So these two very dramatic events really seem to tie together in my mind. Well, lo and behold, I looked up what this week's Torah and prophet readings are, and they include the golden calf incident in Exodus and the Mount Carmel sacrifice in 1 Kings 18. So apparently I wasn't onto anything new. Ancient Judaism has tied these events together also. But as I was looking at these things, not just through Jewish eyes, but through Messianic Jewish eyes, on this side of the cross, some things really spoke to me. And this is one of them. So when it was Elijah's turn, he didn't chastise the people for their disobedience. He wasn't sarcastic or mocking towards God's people like he'd been with the false prophets. He prayed. He prayed, answer me, O God, so that the people will know that you are God. Turn their hearts back to you. Just like Moses had pleaded with God to forgive the people when he first found out about the golden calf. And just like Jesus prayed for our forgiveness from the cross where he was parched and broken, like these people were, where he cried out to God, but God did not answer. Jesus knows what this feels like. He knows what it feels like to be broken and alone. But at the same time, he's also the one who speaks up on our behalf to heal our brokenness, our desperation, and our places of feeling alone. Jesus is the greater Moses and the greater Elijah. When Jesus was transfigured up on the mountaintop in front of Peter and James and John, Moses and Elijah were there, right? And these two passages together made me wonder, were the three of them talking about their compassion for a desperate and hurting people, like Moses had shown in the wilderness and how Elijah had shown in Mount Carmel? Because that's what Jesus was about to demonstrate on the cross for all of the world's desperate and scared and broken people, for all of us today. Jesus didn't mock broken people. Jesus doesn't mock broken people. He isn't sarcastic when we're flailing around, he says, come to me. Come to me and I will give you rest for your souls. And we find that when we say in wonder, just like these guys, Adonai hu ha-Elohim, the Lord alone, he is God. We find that the skies open up and our parched souls receive water, living water. And so on this Sabbath Eve, I don't know what your life looks like. I don't know if you're feeling parched and desperate for a word from God. I don't know if you've been limping between God and idols to figure things out and cover all of your bases, spiritually and physically and emotionally. But what I have experienced in my life, just like the Israelites at Mount Sinai and then the Israelites on Mount Carmel, is that God isn't up there mocking me or being sarcastic towards us. He has shown on the mountain of Calvary that he desperately loves us, that he wants nothing more than to turn our hearts back to his love and to make us whole, to experience true shalom. And so I pray that you would meditate on that you would know the depth of his love for you and the soul level rest that he offers every single day. And especially as we enter this time of rest and reflection on